On Thursday, we talked about Puritans and Massachusetts and the North, and we talked about kind of the middle class, religiously driven society that they built. We talked about their religious beliefs. We talked about their values and their virtues. We talked about how the North came to be, kind of that. And I think we left it with Paul Johnson's definition of a Yankee, being a person who's torn between the desire to do what is right and the desire to get on in the world and make something of yourself. And that is, you know, that dichotomy works its way through all of American history. That two tracks, a dichotomy, two. A dichotomy is, you know, a lot of us struggle between, you know, doing the right thing and taking care of ourselves. Are they always mutually exclusive? Of course not. Can you figure out a way to have a society that is righteous and acquisitive at the same time? That's one of those key questions that Johnson asks in the first 3 paragraphs of his book. Has the United States mixed righteousness with material possessions decently? Well, not at all. But it's a hard thing. And we talked about, you know, how the Puritans tried to do that. The South, as is the case in so many things in American history, even today, is completely different. The South is founded not as a religious experiment, not as an example to the rest of the world. The South is founded for the very specific reason that people like to make money. The South is settled as a money-making attempt. First, they're looking for gold. There ain't no gold. And the colonies the colony of Jamestown almost dies until it's saved by what crop? Tobacco. Tobacco is what is known as a cash crop. Meaning what? It makes money. You sell it for.
More money than cash.
You sell it for cash.
Dollars.
Look what you sell it for cash, as opposed to farming for what end?
Survival.
Survival. But you can farm to eat, or you can farm to sell stuff, so you can buy stuff to eat. In the North, most farms in the North, first and foremost, provide food for the farmers. Those New England farms, New York farms, New Jersey farms are growing food for the people who are living there. In the South, crops are grown with the express purpose to sell for cash, for money. And the biggest crop, as we've seen, is tobacco. It is not the only one. Rice, indigo, are others. I'm sorry?
Potatoes?
Potatoes are not grown to a degree. Like you would sell to the Caribbean, maybe to slaves. But your big cash crops are tobacco, rice, and indigo. Later on, what's going to become the cash crop in the American South? We should know cotton. Eventually, it's going to be cotton, but not until after independence. We'll get that in block 4. So how did this work? And we're going to see very quickly kind of how the South turned into a very different society than the North did. The Virginia Company owned Virginia. The king said, all right, Virginia Company, here is Virginia. And Virginia then was huge. In fact, they claimed Virginia all the way to the Pacific Ocean. That all of that land in between, you know, the Chesapeake Bay, a particular meridian, all the way to the Pacific Ocean is Virginia. Now, of course, you can say something is Virginia until you're blue in the face. you actually need people there to enforce that claim. So what the Virginia company wanted was, what was their goal? They wanted a lot of people to do what?
Go there.
Go to Virginia. Make money for who?
Virginia company.
The company. The company is investing in land in the New World. Huge chunks of land. A chunk of land so big, it's like the size of an entire county. Hundreds of square miles. Hundreds of thousands of acres. And there it sits. No one's there but a couple of neighbors. Well, they're going to find investors. And let's say our investor is Ariel. Ariel invests in this company. She shows up. And has Ariel's 200 acres. Okay, that's cool. Tobacco is labor intense. She's growing some tobacco. She brings some of her people with her. On 200 acres, they're growing some tobacco. Tobacco is labor intensive. It takes a lot of work to grow tobacco. And if you were reading Johnson, you learned where the term green thumb, a person who's good with plants has what's called a green thumb. Did anyone catch that in Johnson? Where that came from? Did you catch
Isn't that like when you pick up the tobacco, like it starts to stain your fingers?
Oh,
It's
no,
called to
yeah,
top
yeah.
off. I don't even know what it means.
Because you're supposed to, you just hook your finger to the plant. I forgot.
Yeah, you do. The word Johnson used was you topped off the tobacco plant with your finger and the green juice of the tobacco. So people who were in the tobacco farming business, you could always tell that they were because they had a green thumb. I don't know exactly what that means. I've never grown tobacco, but I'm sure we could Google it if we were so inclined. But it's labor intensive. The problem with America, there's a lot of land, but there's not a lot of people. So we are going to try to come up with a way to bring people to the New World. But bringing people who want to come to the New World, coming to Virginia is expensive in 1635, 1640. So what's going to develop is what we know as what we call the indentured servant system, indenture. This benefits everybody, all right? Ariel wants more people to work her land. People want to come to America. The Virginia company wants to make money. So we go to England. Now, England at this time was going through an economic depression. A lot of economic dislocation in England in the 1630s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. There are people who are willing to work with no land to work. There are people willing to have jobs who can't find them. But they can't pay their own way across the ocean. So Ariel, who has money, she's an investor in this company, she has one of her agents in England and finds Paula. Paula, would you like to come to America? Yes, Paula says, but I don't have any money. So they make a deal. Ariel will pay for Paula to come to America in exchange
Work.
for 7 years service. At the end, so she has become what's called an indentured servant. Now, the Virginia Company instituted what's called the head right system, which means for every person that Ariel brought over, Ariel got another 50 acres of land. And after 7 years, Paula would get her own 50 acres of land. This benefits all three people. How does it benefit Paula? She gets to come to the New World for free, work for a little while, then gets land. How does it benefit Ariel? Workers and more land. How does it benefit the company?
More money.
Yeah, if more people are growing tobacco, they make more money. Ariel's going to find a whole slew of indentured servants. She finds quality indentured servant. She finds John, the indentured servant who is promised land. She finds Kiani. She's promised land. She finds Carmen. She gets land. She very easily could find a whole lot of indentured servants to come over. Making all of this her land. Promising in the future small holdings for all of those future indentured servants. Oh, come on.
It's not working. Erase it. Wait. Oh, wait, no. Yeah.
The only one to erase is the internal borders here.
Can't even do it. Can you stop it? You're never doing it.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Come on.
All them years, you need.
Hey!
No.
She's made herself into a large-scale landowner here, hasn't she? She's got hundreds and hundreds of acres, maybe even thousands of acres. With the money she's earning from tobacco, she could invest in more land. Remember we talked about how Virginia stretches all the way to the Pacific Ocean? Well, if she has money, she can buy some land in what is today Ohio. Do you think that's going to be expensive land or cheap?
Cheap.
Really cheap. And she can hold on to it for 30 years. In 30 years, if people start settling on that land, that investment is going to make her a lot of money. These large landowners in the States start owning hundreds of thousands sometimes of acres of land. She's making a lot of money with her tobacco, selling it back in Europe. Every 7 years, she loses some of her indentured servants to their own farm, but she's always getting more. As she gets more, though, the quality of land promised to the indentured, all the good land is kind of taken up by whom? Her. The original indentured servants, they have some decent land. But as time goes on, the land starts to back up kind of into the mountains. And the land gets harder and harder to raise a crop on 50 acres of land. So your later on indentured servants are being pushed back into the backwoods of Virginia. And who are they going to be eventually? No, who are these? Where have we seen? They're not going to turn into Indians. Where have we seen these ex-indentured servants pushed into or onto the frontier where the farming is more difficult?
Cowboys.
Let's say that's Sebastian's farm.
Savannah?
That's
I'm
Africa.
just guessing. Like, I don't know.
Where have we seen former indentured servants? Hey Maria, if your grades were so super high, I wouldn't mind if you napped, but let's try to take it. Where have we seen former indentured servants pushed into the back country?
The pioneers. Wait. That's the name, right?
Where have we seen colonists pushed into the back country? Ex-indentured servants. Where have these people appeared in our story?
New York? I don't know.
But they're getting pushed down or away. So
Who is?
Indentured service.
Where have we seen them in our story?
Maryland.
What?
Maryland.
Yeah, they're in Maryland or in Virginia or North Carolina. Where in our story have they appeared?
Georgia.
You're giving me locations. I'm not asking for locations.
Oh, Bacon Rebellion.
Bacon's Rebellion.
Oh.
These are Bacon's guys. Thank you.
Because you're like where?
Yeah, I know.
So
Where
was
in the
like
story? But
location.
when I say where in the story, like where in the story does Bob kill Frank? You know, the answer is usually not New York City. That's not how we answer that question. That's not how we use the language. These are Bacon's guys down here. Felitone. Yes, absolutely. I have stuff I'm going to print also. So I'll see you right there.
Nah, it's so
Awesome. Thanks. These backwoods guys in these not so hot farming areas, these are the guys that Bacon leads in his little revolt against the Ariels of the world. Bacon's rebellion changes Virginia and the South. So first of all, the indentured servant movement slows down for two reasons. One, Ariel, after Bacon's rebellion, are you going to want that many more indentured servants to keep putting out here on the frontier just going to get pissed off at you? No. And two, conditions in England are improving. There's less people in England that are wanting to come to America as indentured servants. Years have gone by now. There are other colonies by the 1670s, colonies like Pennsylvania, colonies like New Jersey, colonies like Connecticut, where you can come to the New World for only a little bit of money and not have to serve someone else for 7 years. You can just start your own farm. So by about 1680, so this goes on for about 50 or 60 years. By about 1680, though, the indentured servant movement has died out. But Ariel still needs workers. And in the absence of indentured servants in 80, where is she going to get them? Go ahead, Zanady. So here's Ariel's gigantic estate, growing tobacco. She still needs labor. She needs someone to top off those tobacco plants, whatever the hell that means. If she's not getting indentured servants anymore, where is she going to look for labor? That's why I ask. What do you think? Don't talk to them. I don't know it. Where, if we can't get indentured labor any longer, Ariel still needs people to work in her fields, on her plantation, on her estate. Where is there a source of labor? What is labor? Okay, let's start there. What is labor? People who work. Yeah, where can we find people to work? Of what? Like in California? What institution already in Virginia from 1619 is going to grow because we need labor, we need people to work? I'm sorry? Yeah, in Virginia. indentured servant worked on Ariel's land for 7 years. And then Paula, after her 7 years, she got her own farm. All these indentured servants, eventually indentured servants that are pushed so far into the backcountry that they rebel and burn down Ariel's house, threaten her life. After that, is she going to want the same type of people working for her anymore? No. But she still needs somebody to work for her. Where is she going to go find people to work for her? Gianni, where is she going to find people to work for her?
She should know.
Go ahead, Gianni.
She live in a place like where people are working. Like for work, I think that they would look for slaves.
Slaves. Exactly. You're going to import slaves. That taking the place of the indentured servants who are no longer A, available, or B, trustworthy, are in 1680, when the indentured servant movement dies down, you are going to, there's been slaves in Virginia since 1619. That's kind of the topic of tonight's, or tomorrow's lecture. I think not tonight's, tomorrow. Or not for next Monday, slavery in colonies. But from 1619 to 1680-ish, slavery grows slowly. At the very beginning, it's more like indentured servitude. After 7 years, slaves are set free. They can own land and get their own slaves if they want, which they did. But when the indentured servant movement dies, that's when slavery is going to start to expand very, very quickly. Because slaves are going to be the people working these plantations now. And you're going to see a vast growth in slavery starting in 1680, after Bacon's Rebellion. It's a turning point, Bacon's Rebellion, for American slavery. And right now, we have drawn and talked about the class system in the South. Let's kind of draw it and put it in other terms. Because up north, in Boston, in Massachusetts, we saw a pretty egalitarian class structure. A lot of middle class people, a lot of trade, a lot of independent farmers, merchants, artisans, manufacturers. In the South, it looks completely different. Who do you think, let's hear it. So kind of, we have Ariel's gigantic land holdings, and everything else that we've talked about. Let's draw out the South's class structure. Who rules the South? In our example that we just did here in 6th, 7th period, who rules the South?
The Ariels.
Ariel. And the elite. There is a small group of elite landowners. How do they make their money?
Slavery.
You make money on slaves.
Cash crops.
Slaves are labor. You make money on cash crops grown by slaves. Ariel makes her money selling tobacco. Tobacco is profitable because slaves are growing it. What's our next group of people?
Freed people.
Yeah, like for example in our story, Paula, John, Kiana.
Oh, wait.
Kind of those indentured servants that were there early on, that got decent land. We have a name for those people. It's kind of a funny name. They come to be known as the yeomanry. They are yeomen. Paula is a yeoman. Yeoman. Yeomanry is a term that we use to describe small, independent farmers. Now, let's think on this for a minute. Let's look at our drawing again. What is their economic role in this society? What do they do?
Survive.
Everybody's wrong.
I mean, like,
Grow crops right now.
What is their economic raison d'etre, reason to be? What is their economic role in this picture?
It's a whole
What are they doing? Anyone have a guess on that?
The laborers, their job is to make the tobacco to make the money.
Well, they're not laborers. These guys own their own farms. Here's 50 acres. Here's Paula. She owns her land. She's not a laborer. She's an owner. She owns her 50 acres. 50 acres is enough to, you can, it's larger than subsistence. So what's her economic role? The tobacco, where does the tobacco get manufactured, guys? Where does, this is a traditional where question, where does the tobacco get manufactured?
England.
It grows, but you can't smoke a leaf of tobacco. You have to do something to it. I mean, you can, when you burn a leaf of tobacco, that's not the same as smoking a cigar. Where do you make cigars?
England.
England. You ship them, Mario's right. The tobacco is put on barges, shipped to northern ports, where it is put on ships, sent to England to be manufactured. So I will ask the question again. What's Paula's role in this socioeconomic system that we have here? What do you think, Paula? What are you doing?
Are they the ones who are shipping?
Now, people in the north do the shipping. The tobacco gets put on big barges, it gets brought to Boston or New York or Philadelphia, put on a ship, sailed across the ocean. I'm sorry?
She has a
Maybe a small one.
Yeah.
If she's wealthy enough, she might have one slave that works with her side by side in the fields. But that's not her economic role. If she has a slave, that's fine. They still have the same economic role. What are they doing? She may or she may not. It depends on just quite how wealthy she is. She might, but she's not a large slave owner. If anything, she owns one or two. What is her, or her and her slaves, whatever her, is not important, frankly. What's her economic role, Navy?
She has to give them the
Give them what?
give them the then she has to yeah.
What do you mean?
Okay, so you said they farm them, right?
Yeah, you grow tobacco, you put it on a barge, you send it up north.
Okay, that's all I'm saying.
She's gonna say they send it up north.
Yeah.
No, that's,
It's local.
they grow what? No. Who grows tobacco here?
Ariel.
Ariel. Ariel grows the tobacco. Kiani, what do you think?
What? Is she growing food for them to purchase?
For who to purchase?
The meat?
Yes, bingo, you got it. Kiani's got it.
That's
Her job, very good.
Yeah, I actually got it. Stop.
Her job. What's so funny? Karime, I'm sorry. I know that. Karime got it! Say it nice and loud, Karime.
that they just grow food for the people that are above them to buy off of them.
Yeah. Ariel doesn't waste acreage growing food. Food is a lot cheaper than tobacco. She doesn't make any money growing food on her estate. She only grows, by and large, she grows stuff to sell. Meaning, she has to buy her food from somewhere. She buys her food from the owner. Paula, on her 50 acres, 30 acres raises what she uses, 20 acres is surplus, sells it to Ariel's people to put on Ariel's table. Meat, bread, corn, wheat, apples, whatever. She has a big, whatever the soil will support, she grows it. She eats some of it. The rest she sells to Ariel. And with the money she makes, she buys things that she wants. You know, manufacture a new bed, a nice dress for Sunday, silverware, glass. Glass is incredibly expensive in the colonies because glass is only manufactured in England, and it's tough to ship because it's glass. It's fragile. That is how this economic system works. If you looked at a county in, well, before we get to that, what are these guys doing? These backwoods. We're going to call them, they're subsistence farmers. The soil there is not good enough to grow enough food to have a surplus.
So they just do it for themselves.
They just do it for themselves. We're going to call them poor ones. I'm sorry?
They isolated?
They are more isolated. So we'll draw a little map in a second to kind of show. And down at the very bottom of our social structure is what?
African.
The slaves. Africans. What is conspicuously missing here?
Free slaves.
There are free slaves in either one, probably in this general economic. What is blazingly not here, Maria, that we saw up in Massachusetts? What's not there? What is conspicuous by its absence? Don't look at me. What class group of people that we saw so much of in Massachusetts, Maria, is not here? No. Native American, but by this time Native Americans have been pushed by and large into the mountains. What class, Maria, of people is missing? What do you think? What's not here? What do you not see? If we drew this same chart, Maria, for New England, what we talked about last time, would there be a big landowning elite? No. Would there be slaves in New England? No. What are there a lot of in New England? What class of people do we say New England is made up, by and large, majority of what class of people, Maria? No. All of the farmers in New England, all of the nail makers and the sail makers and the fishermen. What class is old guys? Everyone put your hands. This is Maria's game. She's getting. What class of people is almost everybody in New England? Are they upper class? Are they lower class? Are they? All that trade doesn't produce money for anybody? Do you see a middle class? Do you see a lower class here? You don't see a lower class here? Well, the slaves don't even count. But you're poor white. What do you not see here?
There you go.
There is no middle class in the South. A middle class is created by trade, by manufacturing, by artisans, the fishermen and timber people and shipbuilders and nail makers and coopers and the 50-acre farms, that all formed a gigantic middle class. There is no middle class in the South. There will be no middle class in the South until the 1960s, really. If you look at this. This is Southern society until halfway through the 20th century. That if you went down south in 1937, well within living memory. I bet you know a lot of people that were alive in 1937. They're 70 years old. It's not that old.
80.
If you went, that's 77.
Yeah.
My grandfather was born in 1924, he just turned 90. If you went down south in the 1930s, you'd still find a tiny elite and a bunch of poor white people and a bunch of poor black people. Think about, are there any large cities in the South until recently? Atlanta.
Wait, no. Houston, yeah.
Houston, not until recently.
Florida.
Florida's not a city. Charleston's a beautiful town, but never a big city. If you look compared to New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Baltimore, so if you think kind of historically of the big cities in America, none of them are in the South. Miami only since the 1960s, when you had a lot of Hispanic immigration. New Orleans is always a bit of an outlier. Who said New Orleans? Richmond is always a sizable town. New Orleans is always a sizable town because New Orleans is a giant port. The stuff that's being sold in New Orleans, though, where's it coming from? The whole Mississippi Valley up in the north. It's being sold out of New Orleans, but a lot of the stuff in New Orleans is coming from the north. Abraham Lincoln turned against slavery when he took a trip down to New Orleans, selling his family's wheat or whatever the hell he was selling. You look at this class chart, if you will. This is what the South looks like for 200 years or more. When you lead at the top, a group of small independent farmers that are simply providing food for the elite, that a group of poor subsistence whites, and a large group of slaves. Yeah?
Religious figures would fall into elite, right?
Depending on who they preached to. You know, that the elite had their churches, the yeomanry kind of might have gone to them, sat back. You know, the elites gets the special seats up front, they pay good money for those seats. The poor whites, they go to church back in the backwoods. You know, hack it out of the street. If they're religious really even at all. Slaves go to religious services, you know, on their own. So if we were looking at this geographically, like someone kind of brought up, if this is our county, that's the ocean. Right, that's the Atlantic Ocean. Your elites live here, on the coast. If there are rivers, we have a river. The elites live along the rivers. They send their tobacco. They put every plantation had a wharf. You put your tobacco right on the boat, you sail it up, and then up to the north. The yeomanry, and I really wish I had my other colors here. The yeomanry lived in and around where the elites live. They're farming these small patches, and they are, you know, here's a map of the whole county. They're very small. Providing food for these large plantations And maybe in a county, there would only be a handful of elites in this county. Back here, as we get closer to the mountains, the people kind of get poorer. And this is where your poor whites live. Most whites do not own slaves. That's a fact in the American South until the Civil War. Only about 25% of white Southerners owned even one slave. And less than 1% owned more than 50. Your slaves would live on these elite plantations, mostly, with a smattering throughout the wealthier of the yeomanry. By the time you got out to the mountains, there are no slaves. Because the people who live out here simply cannot afford them. That's the South. A class society ruled by a small elite that's hereditary pretty much. There's only about, in the whole South by the Civil War, there's only about 500 families that run the South. Your Washingtons, your Lees, your Jeffersons, your Madisons, we all know many of their names.
Because they became
Because
presidents.
a lot of them became the founding fathers. All of your founding fathers so let's finish it with this before I put the link up on the board. The last thing we talked about on Thursday was your founding fathers from the North came from the middle class, came from the trading classes, the prosperous farmers. Adams, Hamilton, Livingston, Frelinghuysen, a street in New Jersey, is a founding father.
The youngest one?
I'm sorry?
Is that the young guy? Because I know New Jersey had the youngest.
I think the youngest guy was Jonathan Dayton, I think, but I don't know off the top of my head.
I just know he came from New Jersey.
I wouldn't bet any money on it, but for some reason, the name Jonathan Dayton popped into my head as the New Jersey delegate.
Yeah.
You can check that. I would be not surprised if I was wrong, but that's the name that for some reason popped into my head. The founding fathers from the South are all whom? They're all the elites. The Washingtons, the Jeffersons, the Madisons, the Lees. Any question on the South? All right.
Wait, what's the little circle in the middle? Sorry. That was good job.
Kind of other little yeomanry, I think. All right. Home lectures.
Wait, isn't this on Blackboard?
Yes, so tonight's lecture is on Blackboard. If you are on Blackboard, it is
Night 2 or 3?
tonight will be night 3. Here is,
This one?
yeah, tonight is night 3, mercantilism. 2, 3, mercantilism. There it is, I'll blow it up.
You don't have to.
Slit her wrist. I mean, her throat.
There it is, folks. There's mercantilism. It is on Black. Please,